All right, good afternoon. I'm Jason Liggett, City of Urbana, Urbana Public Television. Thank you for the applause, James. I'm glad I brought my fan club. Alongside with me, Mary Cardona, the Executive Director of Wisconsin Community Media, and Mike Bradley of Bradley Law, LLC. Mike has been working in cable issues for 25 years now, so we're happy to have him here today. Just wanted to give you a brief rundown. We're kind of covering a lot of topics during this session concerning law in your production, so I just wanted to give you a rundown of what we plan to discuss. I will present royalty-free music and stock footage options that you can use for your production. I know everyone wants them all to be free. They're royalty-free, which doesn't mean free. You'll still have to pay some money for them, but there's definitely some affordable options, and that's one of your handouts as well, so you don't have to scribble down notes as I talk. It's already there. You have the website. I even included some pricing information on one of those as well. Mary Cardona is then going to present on fair use and what you're able to use in your media productions. And then we're going to kind of turn it over to Mike, and Mike's going to have a whole variety of topics that he has expertise on. He wants to talk on a couple of new cable cases. And then the Americans with Disabilities Act and how that relates to closed captioning concerning a traditional cable channel or online, and what that means for our access centers. He'll also discuss equal time rules concerning politicians, and when it gets into election time is where we always kind of hear that, what the equal time rules are, and how we will follow those or strive to follow those, I hope. And then music licensing for PEG channels. So we're talking BMI and ASCAP and CSAC. And then we're also going to touch on advertising versus underwriting sponsorships. Obviously, the financials are always tough for all of us. So one way that we've kind of been able to raise some money over the years is looking for underwriting sponsorships. But it's important to know the difference between advertising, because we can't advertise in the traditional sense on our PEG channels, but underwriting sponsorships are a possibility. And then the best practices for editing PEG programming. What can you take out of a city meeting? What probably you might not want to take out of a city meeting because it's part of the record and First Amendment rights and so on and so forth about that. So I'll go ahead and start. You can follow along with your handout. It's labeled royalty-free music and stock footage. I compiled a list of some of the ones that we've used in the past, as well as kind of put that out there to the ACM listserv, some other community access centers and what they're using. Storyblocks is a good one for both audio and video and transition. Yeah.
So I just want to read this to you because I just on Wednesday got a notification from Storyblocks.
Uh-oh.
And you're all going to be really disappointed. They're switching their licensing, and your gas moment's coming here. The annual government rate pricing for 5 users is $10,000.
What is it for one user?
You can't do one user. It's only by the person now.
Oh, well.
I had a long argument with them, and they offered me $9,000 after that.
So I'm wondering, what is it for individuals? And this is the first one on the list there that was $360 annually.
I just saw it and I was like, ooh, I'm going to read you guys the email that I got from
Yeah.
them. So yeah, 5 is going to be $10,000, 10 users is $13,000, and 15 users is $15,000.
Okay. That would be unaffordable for us at least.
Every single person who has an individual that's a municipality, business. Basically, it's to yourself. So, like, they didn't have a business license when they first started out. They only sold individuals, and now they're switching that model to,
Yeah, and they're
the funds
and collecting a lot of funds. That's not a small increase.
That was not a small increase. So just a heads up.
All right.
I just had this conversation on Wednesday. We were very upset.
Yeah, absolutely. They do have a lot of great content on there, but I don't think it's worth $10,000 at least to me.
Just music, by the way. $10,000 for just music.
Okay. Yeah.
Digital Juice is not on your list. They're a lot cheaper.
Oh, cheaper than the 360?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, it was but it was a one-time. It's all
Okay, so it's called Digital Juice. $250 a year for Digital Juice. And is that just audio, Scott?
No.
It's video as well?
Audio, video, animated backgrounds, transitions.
Okay. Yeah, so similar to what? Okay, cool. Digital Juice. Cool. The art list is $299 annually, and that's audio. The kind of partner with Art List is the Art Grid, which is video. That's $599 annually. That's in addition. If you have Art List and you want video, you're going to go to Art Grid as well. Pond 5 is another one. They have pay by the track. A lot of times I prefer the pay by the track method, just because if you're just looking for, some background music for one PSA or one production, you can go on there and, obviously it ranges. They have $7 ones that, you might not fit your production, and they have, $75 ones and anywhere in between. We usually try to limit we only have $500 annually for what we call marketing. So it's any type of marketing, but we're able to use our marketing budget for tracks sometimes. We also use Audio Jungle a lot. They're another one that has, they have audio and video on there. We haven't ventured into using any stock footage video, but we do use audiojungle.net, and they're another one that's by track. And I don't think we've paid more than $20 a track for anything that we use, and we've been happy with that service. And it's fairly straightforward. Once again, these are royalty-free music, so in some cases you might need to credit them. YouTube has flagged us a couple of times, and then we just have to upload our agreement with Audio Jungle, and then they say, "Oh, okay, you're not flagged anymore." So if you ever have an experience with that, not just Audio Jungle. Then a couple of free ones. Free is nice, but the quality isn't as great as the other ones that I previously listed on there. The YouTube Studio Audio Library, we've used that for several productions. We kind of gear that more towards our public access, because we have community access members that aren't necessarily gonna pony up the money for some of these paid ones, and we don't have a blanket large annual license for anything. So that's an option for the YouTube Studio, and then also the free music archive.org. And of course, we heard Digital Juice, and there's other ones. This isn't every list out there, but certainly if you're looking for something, one of these might fit your needs for royalty-free music. And then I'll go ahead and turn it over to Mary. She's going to discuss fair use.
Thanks. No, that's great. Okay, so I'm basically taking this presentation from that handout I gave you called Fair Use. And I'm just going to go over the major points. Basically, fair use is a way to allow society to kind of move forward culturally and to utilize the material that's created by individuals who have a right to control their property under copyright law, but to continue to have a cultural conversation so that we're not just so that it kind of keeps the free exchange of information going. So it's a balance between the creator's right to possess their creation and the right of society to deliberate and discuss. So next slide. So what I want to do is just go through these basic reasons why you can use, or under what conditions you can use copyrighted material. So the first one is employing copyrighted material as the object of social, political, or cultural critique. So if you're analyzing like a news program, or you're analyzing a movie, and you want to show a little snippet of the movie to show your point, that is allowable use. It's very important that that whatever you're creating, the focus isn't on that product, or that you're not showing so much of that product that you are basically replacing your product isn't replacing the value of that product. Like, you're not showing so much of the movie that people don't have to go see the movie anymore. So you have to always be very conscious of how much do you really need to show in order to express your criticism or your point. 2, quoting copyrighted works of popular culture to illustrate an argument or point, so it kind of flows into that. So again, the idea is, just use what you really need to make your point. Attribute the material so that people know what you're quoting or what you're drawing from. If you're creating like a documentary, it's best if you're maybe illustrating a point about like 20th century or I don't know, 20th century filmmaking or something like that, that you're not drawing off from the same movie here, for example. That's a bad example. But you want, you want to like have a variety of sources so that your product is unique. It's not just, again, going straight to that just one source where you're essentially replicating what the original author did. Okay. 3, capturing copyrighted media content in the process of filming something else. I think this has a lot to do with what we do. So, for example, if you are at a community fest of some sort and there's a rock and roll band playing covers in the background and you're interviewing somebody, you're interviewing that person, you're in a real situation, it's verisimilitude. It's just, it is what it is. It is reality, And so you can't just tell the band to stop playing in order to do this interview. So in that sense, as long as you're not like just shooting the band and that's what your focus is, if your focus is that interview and you're doing this interview and that interview and you're going here and you're going there, that's okay. But you want to make sure, we'll talk about copyright and ASCAP later because there's another angle to that. But again, if it's incidental, and you're not covering, an entire piece of music, and you're not using that music now instead of maybe using some of this royalty, this kind of music that Jason was talking about. If you're using that music in the reality for your background, for your whole piece, then again, that's not any good. You need to be using something that you have the right to use. 3, capture. Okay, we did that. 4, using copyrighted material in a historical sequence. Again, this really goes back to: are you using just the amount necessary to make your point? Is there nothing else that you could use to replace it? Are you using something just because you're too lazy to create something of your own? So there are great questions in this handout that you can ask yourself to make sure that you're utilizing it in a fair way. Okay. I think I covered everything. Is there anything else on there? Yeah, can you show that your project was not designed around the material, does not take from one source repeatedly or predominantly, there's no suitable substitute, the material cannot be licensed or a license is excessive in relation to the budget of the film. That's an interesting one, and that's something you really need to think about when you go to that direction. Use is limited to just the portion needed to make a point. The copyright owner is identified. Okay, anything else?
That's all.
Okay. All right.
Mechanical skills are
Yeah, Scott.
Mary, just on point 3 there, capturing copyright. So here's a scenario that just happened to us. That we're filming a high school basketball. Right? And we've got our announcers are courtside as the players are coming out. They're doing their warm-ups. And they're talking about the keys of the game and whatever. They're doing their pre-game show, and the pep band starts playing. Right? So or they're playing music over the PA, which is copyrighted. So we've captured that incidentally. We're really focused on the announcers, the commentators talking about the game. But we've picked up this copyrighted music performance, and you think we're okay there, that's fair use. Now what happens at halftime when the dance team comes out to perform, and they're also performing or dancing to a copyrighted recorded track that's being played over the PA? It's now part of their performance, and we're capturing the performance that's going on at halftime of the basketball.
That's a good question. I'm going to toss that to Mike.
Well,
YouTube says no, I'm here to tell you.
Right. Right. And
At least their boss.
I think what you have to find out from the school is, did they get adequate licensing for display on television? And you might find out that they didn't get adequate licensing for even putting it on the field. But I think that's what you have to do. Find out what license that the school district actually received or purchased. Yeah.
If it's a pep band playing a popular song, we'll talk about ASCAP later, and it appears we may be covered there, Mike?
If it's on your cable channel,
Mm-hmm.
not if you're streaming it though.
Right. Right.
Right.
Yeah. So he'll get into that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found it interesting when it comes to YouTube and when pings it. For example, we've done ice skating things. There's no way we can put any ice skating stuff out there because they're all playing some kind of form of canned music. But even with musical performances, we put a lot of concerts online. And the current band I play with plays a lot of indie alternative stuff. And I put it on YouTube once, and I got, it nailed me for like 24 different songs, and it was telling me which live performance of Dave Matthews we were doing at Alpine Valley on 1994, and it's like, whoa, we sound like Dave Matthews? That's great. But you can get pinged by anything. I mean, if it's a pep band, most likely not. But if it's a raw live entertainment and in your local park, there's a chance you can get hit by it.
I don't think we bought the licensing to this, did we?
We didn't.
Wisconsin, sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say, just recently, there's a local producer that he has his own band, and he records it and we put it on YouTube, and it got taken down. We got a flag and everything, and so I was gonna try to see if we could fight it. What do you think we should do?
I think you're going to have a hard time.
Okay.
Yeah. It's going to be expensive. Last I heard, YouTube has a lot of money. Right? Yeah. Yeah.
I think you and I were talking about this last night. So I work for a city that has a performing arts center. And the performing arts
Yes.
director and I talked a lot about this when I came in 3 years ago to the job. And pretty much him and I, they paid for what happens in the arena, kind of like a basketball game.
Yeah.
The school probably did pay for what was happening right then and there. Say when I worked in college.
Yes.
Only, let's say there's 500 people at that basketball game. Only 500 people are allowed to see that at that time.
Yeah.
And then I reported though, in theory, millions can see it. Probably not going to happen from a little peg channel, but in theory, that's why you kind of get cracked down on the streaming side of things, because you're potentially what you can reach versus what they're paying for is 500,000 people at a one time, and that's it.
Yeah.
That's what kind of we struggled with that when I was at a cable company, and even now we've told like schools that come in and want to do talent shows because they're doing popular music, kind of like the skating thing.
Yeah.
Like, sorry, unless you have the rights to that.
Exactly.
We're not going to pay for
Right.
it.
Yeah,
If they pay
that's
for it, great.
and that's my point. They have to make sure that the license covers the broad or the cable casting of the performance. Correct.
Although, like you may bring up
Mm-hmm.
with the ASCAP, as long as and you're not using YouTube and you're using like Teleview, and you're running it through cable, you're covered. Doesn't understand.
You should be covered, and we will be talking about that if you're showing it just on your cable channel.
But then streaming out from the cable channel.
No.
And it's weird because the ASCAP
It is-
said yes.
Oh, well then send that to us. I would like to see that. Mike Wassenaar.
YouTube will not.
Oh, good.
From ASCAP player, but it does not mean that it's not subject to liability by the rights holder. So if the rights holder is pissed off about it, they could potentially have a course of action against Teleview, and I'm not saying it's Teleview, but that specific branded player, right?
So you got it from Google, from YouTube, from ASCAP. So they got it from ASCAP
This is
though.
Dave
So you
Rowland.
said that about the Teleview product?
If I run it on cable, I can stream it out to on my screen. As long as it's cable first, and then it goes out.
Yeah.
Furious.
But I should have.
That's what I was telling you
It-
about.
it-
If you could share that with us, that'd be great.
And my email says if you go to YouTube or Vimeo and stream to them, you're covered. Because I kept that. And you know, Mary and I've been at odds since January over this.
Well, and tell me.
It's Dave Ruland, I was telling you about him.
Okay.
I did forward a bunch of the emails to Mike.
Okay.
Right, but I didn't see the one on streaming, so that interests me. And so is that covered on the NCTA kind of blanket license?
Yes, that's what he
So
said.
it covers the cable channel and streaming.
If the cable channel has a platform like Vimeo or YouTube, and they use specifically that word YouTube or Vimeo, and that's why it's so confusing to us, because I hear, you know, ASCAP say, yeah, you're covered, and then it's confusing. So.
Well, it is confusing, and actually that was going to be the introduction to my presentation on music licensing, as it's confusing as hell. Yeah, right. Yeah.
I will send you that. You won't charge me if I send it to you, will you?
No, unless you want me to. Did you want me to? I will. I mean,
Attorney
I'm
friend
capable.
charges me to say hello.
Yeah. I'm not that kind of attorney.
Okay.
All right, guys. I know a lot of you or many of you were here at the last session, so I just wanted to give you a quick update on the cable cases. Those of you that were here first session, I'm going to do the entire first session in one slide, and hopefully in less than a minute. There were two major cases that came out in 2021, and they're still in progress right now. Actually, they can be appealed here on November 1st. November 1st is the deadline this year. But the City of Eugene versus FCC case was an appeal by local governments over an order that the FCC issued on cable franchising. It related to how franchise fees are calculated, and kind of setting us back 35 years to how we used to figure how franchise fees were calculated to something completely different. The good news there is that the Sixth Circuit actually completely reversed the FCC on how some of these costs are calculated that they were using to reduce franchise fees. So the ultimate impact of the FCC's order now is, I would say, nominal compared to what it was, which would have been significant. The other issue in that case was authority of local governments or state governments, and in Wisconsin it would probably be state government, to regulate non-cable services provided over a cable system. So it was a very, very significant process that we went through. I know some Wisconsin cities participated with our group in submitting comments. We ended up appealing it as well, participated in the appeal, and if there is an appeal to the Supreme Court, which we think there will be, we'll have the opportunity to participate in that as well. The other case is NCTA versus Fry, and that's a case that completely upheld Maine legislation that was passed in 2018 relating to PEG television, and it was a 100% victory for Maine cities. The Maine law required the PEG channels to be by the local broadcasting channels. It required electronic programming guide usage, and it required HD channels if the signal is being provided by the access station in HD. It has to be provided to subscribers in HD. And there was also a build-out provision in that legislation. U.S. District Court completely upheld the law, and that was followed by the First Circuit that completely upheld the law. It's a fantastic result. That also has an appeal deadline to the Supreme Court of November 1 of this year, so that's just Monday. And then finally we talked about over-the-top litigation, and I think most of you know what over-the-top is, but those are services provided over the internet to customers. So think Hulu, Netflix, Disney Plus, and the like. And a number of states have brought litigation seeking franchise fees or franchise requirement of over-the-top providers, and those have all been unsuccessful so far. And as we discussed at the last session, we think they'll probably continue to be unsuccessful going forward. Okay, so I'll try to go over closed captioning just a little bit. a number of Wisconsin cities participated in doing a study of closed captioning, getting to be maybe 4 years ago now already. It's hard to believe, but the closed captioning requirements haven't really changed a whole lot. And I don't want to kind of repeat what was said at Daniel's session last year, but just, very kind of from a 10,000 feet, the ADA applies to all of us, whether you're a city, whether you're a public access organization. It's going to apply to you. It's applying to you as a public access organization because you're essentially an agent of a city. Okay. The ADA applies to internet streaming, not just your cable channel. And I did a presentation at the annual ACM conference in July, and when I did that, I did some research just to kind of see what the latest and greatest closed captioning cases were. And what I found was that most ADA cases involving video are relating to internet streaming and not the PEG channel itself. And so you do have to be very cognizant that that the ADA effective communications requirements do include streaming services. And then when you get to thinking about it, I don't know if I was talking to Daniel or somebody, but you get to thinking about it. In Florida is where we saw a lot of closed captioning lawsuits, ADA closed captioning lawsuits on internet streaming. And it was never the biggest cities; it was always the smallest cities, right? And so when you look at those cases and you're thinking, well, it seemed like it was the same firm, and they were picking out about 20 different cities to sue, and they were all over the state. And you think, okay, if I'm in Miami, I can hit up all of these cities' web pages and see what they're doing, and I can file a lawsuit real easy if they're not captioning, right? But it's a lot harder if I have to actually go to the city and watch the PEG channels. So I think that was part of the reason why it was on internet streaming more than the PEG channels. But be aware that if you are streaming, and I encourage you to stream, but you should be looking at streaming options for online stuff as well as your cable channel, and do your due diligence. So when we did that study a few years back, we looked at what are the requirements, and then there's exceptions to the law. So you can not have to caption if the captioning just creates an undue financial burden to your organization, your city, or your access organization. But you have to do that due diligence. You have to know what those costs are. And I would suggest that the pricings are constantly changing, so it's more favorable now in many instances, and the technologies are getting better. So you need to really be doing that due diligence fairly regularly by talking to some of these vendors that were here. Daniel from Municipal Captioning doesn't charge anything for reviewing your situation and then giving you options on various solutions for your organization. So continue to do your due diligence, and then ultimately have a plan. What are you going to do? Are you going to dip your toe into the water somehow to provide some sort of captioning, even though it might not be the very, very best, but it's maybe the best that you can do under the circumstances that you have? I would suggest that you at least dip your toe in and try to do some things so that if anybody is watching, if a law firm that is looking to bring ADA claims is looking at your website, that they'll see that you actually have some sort of captioning. It'll make their lawsuit a lot more difficult if you're doing at least something. Okay. And they're not looking for a big fight, by the way. They're looking for fast, easy money from your city. Okay. So in some of our slides, I just put some sample policies. So hopefully all of your organizations have programming policies. And I would suggest that public access organizations do that for sure, but also your government and educational access programmers do too. All of these policies that I'm showing you today are from a government access channel, government access only channel. So I won't read that, but basically it's acknowledging that while they're not per se required, and this is an older policy. I think if I was writing it today, I'd probably be writing it differently. But it does say that the commission will focus on providing an accommodation in ways that aren't unduly burdensome to the commission, to their cities.
Mike has something.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
It's a great framework. It's a great framework.
Yes.
To be approaching the issue, and if you accommodate members of the public for production, you should have a similar policy for accommodating disabled producers.
Oh, interesting.
Right.
Yeah, so Mike Wassenaar from ACM was saying not only have this relating to your programming, but also to the producer's programming on your channel. Yeah, that's a really good point. Thank you for that. Okay, I love this guy. So let's pretend this is Council Member Grumpy, and he is not happy because let's just make up something, and maybe you have your own stories that you can make up for it. But I'm just going to make one up right on the spot. Okay, Council Member Grumpy is he's upset with you because there was some public comment at the beginning of a city council meeting. And his opponent coming up in the election got up there and told the public, how wrong Councilmember Grumpy is on 10 different issues, and he wants you to he basically wants you to edit that out of the meeting. And so what do you do, right? So that's one. Or it could be this is an opponent. So this is future council member Grumpy, and he's upset because a sitting council member got to talk about an issue at a city council meeting for a long time and made him look really good, and he wants the opportunity to get on the channel and speak for the same amount of time as the council member did, and he's saying, well, the equal time rules, I should have that time automatically. So in that case, future council member Grumpy is wrong. The equal time rules don't apply to access channels. It applies to broadcast channels, okay, not access channels. And there is an older case that confirms that. But the point of really this slide was to get you to thinking that you really should have some sort of political programming policy in your programming policies. And so we put an example of political programming there, and it's just a whole lot easier when Council Member Grumpy comes in and you can say, look, we have a policy already, and here's what the policy says, and no, we're not going to give you equal time. No, we're not going to edit a city council meeting because the council already decided that we're not going to be in the business of editing public meetings. And that, and many organizations will do some sort of programming in advance of elections. And in this particular example, this is a group that actually will give every single candidate for office 5 minutes of time and to put together a video and then have that played in advance of the election. And so number one there is really talking about that we'll do that, and that's okay. But other than that, we're staying out of the the political realms. Does that make sense? Does everybody have political programming policies? I thought that one's, I don't know, I still kind of like that one. Okay, musical licensing. It's confusing as hell. So what we've learned here is that we know for sure that the PEG channels are covered with a blanket license between NCTA and ASCAP. I'm reasonably certain that there's also a blanket license with BMI. Okay, I don't know about CSAC and GMR, and I would presume that there's some blanket licensing there, but I don't know. So the best thing to do is just verify with those different organizations, if there is a blanket license in place for programming on your channel itself. And so I should just take a step back. I'm kind of assuming that you know what these big music houses are, but there's two main ones, music licensing groups, that have almost all of the copyright holders. So it's BMI and ASCAP. Those are the two biggest ones, by far the biggest music catalogs. But there's these other two, CSAC and GMR, that have come to the fray, and they have really very few artists, but they have some popular ones. So you do have to kind of be careful when you're looking at artists. And the other confusing thing about licensing is even when you have a BMI or ASCAP license, the way music licensing works is that a song could have music rights held by BMI, ASCAP, and CSAC, and GMR, all one song. And so then you need the license from all four. And it's difficult to figure out per song what that actually is. So anyway, the bottom line is verify coverage. And has anybody here verified coverage with BMI? I did see the ASCAP, which was really helpful. But has anybody gotten a BMI? I'm 85% sure that there's a BMI blanket license with the cable operators and BMI, but I just can't. I haven't placed confirmation yet.
Can
Anybody?
I ask a clarification question? So ASCAP, that is copyrighting the music itself, not the performance, correct? So it doesn't give you the right to play Cheap Trick, but it does give you the right to play a Cheap Trick song.
Correct. Yes. I think that's right.
And I also want to share with you something from Mike McEntee, what he got
good.
back from Tim Smith from ASCAP, because he asked actually one of the questions Scott asked, said, and it confuses me, but he says, does this apply to recordings by ASCAP artists? We cover sporting events where the PA system will blast pre-recorded music and we have to cut our microphones to avoid broadcasting it. And the answer from ASCAP is, we would already be licensing the sporting events with the specific cable networks, and this would also fall under a public performance already covered by the agreement.
Yeah. So again, they're still talking about the blanket agreement for a PEG channel.
That's all I'm talking
Yes. Yes. That's fine.
about. So that, but he's basically saying that you can play Cheap Trick, right?
Yeah.
So that's confusing to me because I thought ASCAP only covered the music itself, not the performance.
Oh, I see the playback. No, it covers the song. Yeah.
It does.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So then Scott
Yeah.
could play his dancers out there on the floor at halftime.
On the cable channel. On the cable channel. But, Dave,
Yes.
you were saying that there might be a license for streaming as well.
Through Vimeo and YouTube, and I will get you the email
Yeah.
to Mary, and I'll send a copy to you as well,
Yeah.
so we can get this clarified. But
Mhm.
I want to take Mary's question one step
Mhm.
farther. And I'm dealing with this right now. I have a performing arts center like this other gentleman has, and I've got a play coming up, and I forget who names it. It's a Cinderella play, and the people are Concord Theatricals, and
Mhm.
so music, yes. Theatrical, no.
Right.
Stay the hell away from it. What should I do? I mean, I'm staying away from it, but what?
Yeah, I think it's a different license.
Okay.
It's a different license.
So,
So-
people are playing music.
Yeah, the play is different.
They're singing the songs.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Because that's confusing too.
it is confusing. Yeah, and I can't say that I am heavily involved in music licensing and play licensing and things like that. So I know enough to be dangerous at this point.
I talk to our theater director all the time. They're very much in what goes on in theaters, how plays are.
Mhm.
Usually anything I do video-wise, it's usually someone local that has created the play because it's hard to get the rights
Yeah.
on video.
It's really
Also, the theater people know exactly what they're.
Yes.
They have the same issue with
Yes.
even copying their own scripts to give to people. They can only do so much. They have to destroy them and stuff like that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff with plays that comes up.
Yeah, yeah. My daughter was involved in theater in high school, so
Right,
we
there's a lot of it.
dealt with all that too. Yeah, yeah, yes.
I'll read the little piece and
Good.
You're right on the one point here, but this other piece I'll read is very short from Tim.
Well, I got one thing right anyway, so that's good.
We currently, this is from ASCAP, we currently have agreements in place with Roku and Apple TV, which covers the content streaming over these platforms. If you're using these services embedded within your channel's website, then an additional license
Is not required.
Then an additional license agreement would not be required.
Okay.
From Apple and Roku.
Apple and Roku.
Okay.
But if you're streaming content directly from your website using your own embedded player,
Yeah.
you better buy an additional one license.
There you go.
So
Yeah.
that's what we're saying.
That's right.
And I got that same email from Tim saying,
Yeah.
as long as you're going to YouTube and Vimeo, you're okay too.
Okay.
As long as you're in your own website. And I think that's the key, to be within your own website. What you're saying, Tom?
You do need one if you're using it, if you're embedding a player, your own embed, you're gonna need a license. But if you're running your stuff through Roku, TV, and Apple TV from your cable, then you don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what's that? So one of the vendors out here, cable, is it Cablecast?
Yeah.
Cablecast. So they have their own app for Roku. So if you use that technology, I don't know if you have to pay an extra fee, but your stuff will stream. You'll have your own app right on the Roku channel. So I was just on the other night watching my clients' programming, and from all over. So that's interesting. So that streaming's okay. That will be covered. But if you're just streaming out to your municipal page and you're not under one of those umbrellas, you got to make sure you get your license
Yeah, see, I looked at
streaming.
Telview, and I should have been looking at Roku, Apple, Amazon, because they have the somehow. It's not
Mhm.
Telview going to Apple. It's the
Mhm.
app. It's the app, the big guys that they have. So I get it.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's only $269 for a year.
To where?
They said $269 to buy that license.
Oh,
To embed it.
Yeah.
but for Amazon, is that what you said?
No, to embed it in your website, a player.
Oh, well, that's pretty reasonable. Seems like.
Since I put 0, I don't collect any money.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. So.
Maybe you should tell you about that.
Okay, so we're getting some clarification. We still need to, I think when I do this in the future, we'll have some new bullets that say there's some streaming services that have that license, that blanket license in place. But I think the bottom bullet for all these different rights holders is you need to check your licenses and make sure that you're covered in that way. Okay. There are blanket licenses for. I won't go over this very much because I'm not sure it applies to all of you, but municipalities will buy.
I just found
Yes.
something also from ASCAP.
Good.
Hi, Tom. Streaming activities on a public access TV station are not covered by the cable system's license. If your public access TV station has a separate streaming operation, then you would require a separate license, new media, digital license for those performances.
Right. So I think that's consistent with what these guys are saying too, because they're talking about other streaming services that have that blanket license in place for you. So if you're using those particular services, you're good. But if you're putting it out there on something else that's not covered, you're probably in violation. So, okay, so you can get municipal blanket licenses for performances. This is more for playback and arenas and things like that. So you'll see those blanket licenses. So if anybody in City Hall is asking you about how to obtain that licensing, you can get it through ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, and GMR. ASCAP and BMI have blanket licenses that are pre-negotiated through IMLA, which is the International Municipal Lawyers Association. And if you're a member of IMLA, you'll get, I think, like a 10% discount on those licensing, and it's based on population. So I think the last I saw, if you're under 50,000 in population, the BMI license is $364, and ASCAP is similar to that. The CSAC and GMR are twice that, and like I said before, they have much less content. We did do some music licensing advocacy fairly recently. During the Trump administration, the Department of Justice proposed to eliminate two consent decrees that were entered into between ASCAP and BMI as part of an antitrust lawsuit. And those consent decrees had very important restraints on what those two license holding companies could charge local governments. So it was keeping the pricing at an affordable level for those broadcast rights. And so we actually teamed with IMLA to submit comments on behalf of municipalities and IMLA, and urge that the Department of Justice not eliminate those consent decrees, because it would have that negative impact on local governments. And the Department of Justice did decide not to eliminate those consent decrees. So that was a nice victory for us. And another example of why it's very important to participate in these administrative processes. So this one happened to be the Department of Justice, which is a little bit out of my normal work. I would normally be submitting comments at the FCC, but we did it at the Department of Justice in that instance. Okay, advertising on pig channels in Wisconsin. This is kind of interesting. I've kind of gone back and forth. The easiest thing for pig channels to do if they want to have some sort of advertising is just do kind of sponsorships, similar to how PBS does it, But it was interesting. Mary was sharing with me kind of the original terrible Wisconsin law that was passed, but one of the things that was eliminated was the word non-commercial in front of public educational governmental access, and so in a lot of cable franchises, local cable franchises, and cable franchises that you probably had, there were restrictions to having your peg channel be non-commercial. And there's case law and things like that go back that said, okay, if it's non-commercial, then you can't put commercials on your channel, but that's why we looked at more of the PBS type of model. But now that Wisconsin doesn't have that, I think it's at least arguable that you could actually have advertisements on your channels. I just know from working with a lot of access organizations and local governments that we're not real great at figuring out the business model for advertising. It takes a lot of work, and a lot of times you have to hire somebody to do the work. And by the time you do all of that, you end up with almost no dollars. So it's difficult. I get that. But if you decide to do advertising, you should really check your 501c3 organizing documents to make sure you're not somehow violating your and putting your nonprofit status in jeopardy.
What about local governments?
Well, local governments, obviously that's not an issue, but you should have advertising policies, because just like Council Member Grumpy, there's going to be somebody that says, hey, you are advertising for Menards, and Menards is going to have some sort of undue influence over the council now because they want zoning changed over there, etc. So important to have PEG policies in place. And so then we gave you a sample PEG sponsorship policy. Now this one doesn't relate to advertising, it's about sponsorships, because this particular organization is not in Wisconsin, and is also a city or a group of cities. And you can see that in this instance we really follow the PBS model. Okay, but it identifies a lot of different things on what can and can't be on the channel as far as sponsorships. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just wanted to stop you right there, Mike. We appreciate all your expertise. We are at the time, and lunch is getting ready next, right? The
Yes.
closing luncheon and everything.
Yes.
Yeah, so you have our handouts. If you have any other questions or anything, feel free to contact us. Make sure that you fill out the orange form at the back of the room and turn that in. That helps us plan for conferences in the future. And please join me in thanking Mary, and then also especially Mike, for being here today.
Thanks, everybody.